and welcome to day 3 of the Digital Swiss 5, this exciting new innovation in professional bike racing featuring 19 of the very best teams in world cycling. Stefan Kung of Groupama FDJ scored an emphatic victory yesterday, the local favourite taking the lead early on and going on to win the 46-kilometre undulating challenge by 47 seconds from Team Ineos's Filippo Ganna, with Michael Matthews fending off Greg Van Avermaet for third. Well, it's back to the mountains for the riders today. A summit finish on the fabled Newfoundland Pass after 33 kilometres, which starts at Fiesche in the canton of Valais in the Alpine south of Switzerland on roads made famous by the Tour de Suisse. The first 20 kilometres are flat before the gradient grips and the riders virtually ascend the highest road pass in Switzerland with over 1,000 metres of altitude gained in the final 12 kilometres. It's one for the climbers who must judge their effort precisely on a route of contrasts. Well, you can accompany us during the live action on the Ruby AOR app to enhance your understanding of the Digital Swiss 5. Here's how it works. Well, to get the best experience, download the Ruby AOR application to a laptop or smart device and choose the race tab to find the next Digital Swiss 5 race. It's free to download, free to watch each race. Pick the best video resolution and then select the start list for the event. Scroll through the list to see who's riding and their data. Choose your favorite rider or opt to follow the leader as the race unfolds. The menu offers the order of the riders through the various split points in the race. Select the riders while the race is underway. Key data will help to give you the best possible understanding in the world's most exciting online bike racing. Teams and riders to watch out for today include the AG Tour team of Matthias Frank and Bora Hansgrohe, featuring Tour de France top 4 finisher Emmanuel Buchmann. Emerging French climbing talent David Gaudu starts for Groupama FDJ, while Day 1 star Jimmy Whelan will look to score another podium finish in the colours of EF Pro Cycling. Ireland's mountain goat Dan Martin is likely to feature for Israel's startup nation, while Simon Yates has twin brother Adam for company in a powerful Mitchelton Scott lineup.
Yeah, it looks tough. There's a lot of guys doing a lot of watts on there, and for sure it's going to be a tough race. It's going to be an hour basically, a TT basically. We did a little test race actually a few days ago with a team, and it was pretty brutal, especially here. Like I said before, I'm in Andorra, slightly at altitude, so it's not as easy to put the watts out as you'd like. But I think we'll just give it our best shot and see what happens.
Vuelta stage winner Ben King wears the colours of NTT Pro Cycling, and Matej Mohoric of Bahrain McLaren is another who has produced on the highest stage. All eyes will be on Vuelta España champion Primoz Roglic of Team Jumbo-Visma, a man who can climb and time trial with the very best, while Sunweb's Wilco Kelderman is another who has embraced the benefits of virtual racing.
Yeah, I'm really curious how it will be. I never did something like the e-race, so it's something new. I'm really excited to look how it is and how the feeling is. I think it will be painful and enough to suffer. So we will see. First time. So.
Gavin Mannion of the US is a strong climber with rally cycling, while Fabien Redier of Total Direct Energy started the season well. Finally, the Swiss national squad has selected Sylvain Dillier, who raced yesterday in the colours of AG Tour, for this third day of racing in the Digital Swiss 5. Over a minute to go to the start of the Digital Swiss 5 Race 3, and they're heading up the Newfoundland Pass. I can tell you all the riders are on their turbo trainers, thrashing away like crazy to see if they can possibly get with the group in the early stages and stay with the group when the gradient starts to grip after around about 20 kilometres. Wilco Kelderman has told us already it's gonna hurt, and that's been the message that we've had so far, that it is extremely challenging, extremely tough. The Newfoundland Pass, I can tell you, has been almost a constant, a regular feature of the Tour de Suisse over the years, but it's never been a summit finish. So while this is a virtual experience for the riders, it's also unique in as much as we're heading up through a total of 1,500 metres of altitude gained up to the highest mountain road in all of Switzerland. The riders are winding up, and we've got some of the very greatest, some of the names that you were able to pick through on the start list there. Primoz Roglic, 30-year-old Slovenian, is absolutely flying. And the race, I can tell you, as we continue and complete the countdown, they get the starter's pistol and they're underway. It looks like one of the NTT riders might have had a bit of a difficulty off the line, but we're away and up and running, and it will be fascinating, intriguing indeed, to see whether there's going to be an all-out concerted effort in the first 20 kilometers, and who's going to feature in that. Will we have the slightly bigger riders, the time trial specialists, really showing their face in the early stages ahead of the climb to come? Or will everyone try and keep their powder dry a little bit? And tell you, the sort of watts that are being thrashed out by these riders are nothing less than 6 watts per kilo at the moment. Many indeed are putting out over 8 watts per kilo. 16 riders have agreed to have the camera visit them in their home. Looks like we could have a little bit of a problem for Bob Jungels. His camera is suggesting that the Luxembourg time trial champion struggling to get a connection. That's a disappointment for a man who's a pretty useful climber for a rider of his stature. So 1 or 2 riders struggling a little bit. Bob Jungels is on the blower to Tom Stales, looking for direction from his director sportive, and I'm delighted to say I've been joined by Alex Dowsett to run the rule over the riders again for the 3rd day of asking. And Alex, yesterday might have been a route for you. Today it's a bit climby looking, isn't it?
Hey Declan, yeah, I think today's going to be a real interesting one, just with this flat run to the base of the climb. We've seen the last 2 days, the first one being a lot of climbing, the second one being predominantly flat, 2 very different winners as you'd expect, but some much bigger gaps. So if the real powerful riders can get to, because there's no drafting, they could get to the bottom of the climb with actually a decent gap.
Yeah, well, Jimmy Whelan is featuring close to the front at the moment, and there's a man who was a bit of a star, and Alex indeed spoke to him a little bit earlier on. We'll be hearing from him later in the show. Pierre Latour is... he's a late stand-in, I can tell you. Pierre Latour was not riding this race up until a few hours ago, but he was asked to stand in because 1 or 2 riders struggling with difficulties with Wi-Fi connections, and Pierre Latour has seized this opportunity with both hands. The French climber with AG Tour Le Mondial has opened up an advantage in the early stages of 23 meters. Jimmy Whelan of EF Pro Cycling knows the benefit and the advantage of a good start, and Nate Brown, who had his own difficulties on day 1, a non-finisher on that occasion, the rally cycling man, really embracing a second opportunity here, sitting in 3rd place. Lucas Hamilton in 4th for Mitchelton Scott. Uno Zakarin, first appearance in Digital Swiss 5 racing, moves up into 4th place ahead of Lucas Hamilton. Sylvain Dillier is going well in the early stages as well for the Swiss national squad. Nino Schurter is in the company of the 2014 World Road Race champion Michał Kwiatkowski, who is also making his and taking his bow in Digital Swiss 5 virtual racing, the Team Ineos rider. Thereabouts at the outer reaches of the top 10. He's a pretty good outside bet, I think, for victory today. He goes up a hill with unseemly haste for a rider who of his outright power. Just moving up and onto the shoulder of the Polish rider is Nicholas Roach, who finished 2nd on day 1. I was talking to Nicholas a little bit earlier on today. He's really fired up for this. Got a couple of hours on the turbo already today just to get the legs tuned up, and he goes really enthused about virtual racing. He's sincere in his belief that he should be giving of his best for his team, Team Sunweb, in these difficult times, these challenging times, and he's certainly been happy enough to admit that he's maintained his fitness at its very highest level and wants to do well in this race. He's putting the hand up for Team Sunweb, and he's showing well in the early stages. Up to 9th position, Jimmy Whelan, another man who's really embraced online racing, is enjoying this one at the moment. It's sitting in 2nd position, but the flying Pierre Latour has opened up an advantage of over 100 meters. It's going to be a challenge for the riders, Alex, to measure their effort across this first 20 kilometers.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though this is only a 33k race, that last 13k is going to take, I think, double the amount of time the first 20k has taken, just due to the gradients. So you know, it's really going to be a tough old day. And for me, the real interesting rider here is Nino Schurter. Is mountain bikers, the requirements of a mountain biker are very different to that of a road rider. You know, you'd see some of the certainly the older road riders need 2 or 3 hours of racing to really get into their stride, whereas mountain bikers have to be good right from the gun, and it's a very intense effort they have, and often shorter, well, almost always shorter than the efforts that the road riders have. So I think Nino is definitely your dark horse for today, and we can't focus too closely on the first 20k, because I think things will really be shaken up on the final slopes of the climb.
Well, they love their mountain biking in Switzerland. It's at least as popular as road racing, so no surprise that they're featuring Nino Schurter. Indeed, that he's been selected for the Swiss national team. They know these roads well. 33-year-old is going well in the early stages, albeit got a little bit of work to do to get on terms with this man. The flying Pierre Latour maintaining his advantage, charging ahead. This is a tactic for AG2R La Mondiale. And as Pierre Latour just showing a little bit of over-exuberance, a little bit of perhaps enthusiasm that he could come to regret later on, or is this a specific tactic for him to be something of a stalking horse, to really lay it all out and make this more of a 20-kilometer time trial than a 33-kilometer time trial?
It's two ways of looking at Latour's early lead. It's I think it's he can control his pace now, and he can manage his pace based off of whoever's chasing him. But he's burnt a lot of matches early on, so is that when guys start really ramping it up later on, is he, even though he's got that gap in distance, is he going to have is he still going to have it in the locker to up his pace and hold that gap? And I mean, I don't know Pierre super well, and this is the thing as well, online racing, this is not this isn't road racing, this isn't the real world, and I think a lot of these guys are coming into this, certainly guys that haven't raced previously. Jimmy Whelan is the most experienced online racer out of the whole field, and that's because he's done 2 races. So I think we're going to, certainly some of these guys are really going to have paid for their early efforts, and we're going to see a shake-up later on, which is largely down to the parkour. I would be very surprised if we see, this time yesterday, Stefan had already sort of moved ahead and had started to put some gap into his competitors, but I can't see that happening today.
It's a massive effort now, isn't it, by Pierre Latour? He's up to 400 metres ahead of Jimmy Whelan. Nicholas Roach has winded and wended his way up into 3rd place. Nate Brown for Rally Cycling. Well, they had 2 riders in the top 6 yesterday, so clearly he's been motivated by that effort. The American rider sitting in 4th place at the moment. Matteo Badalati sitting in 5th for Israel Startup Nation. I can tell you that Bob Jungels has managed to get going. He's at the tail of the field at the moment. 55 riders still in this at the moment. Bob Jungels has a little bit of work to do to get on terms with Roman Kreuziger, as Larry Warbass, a man who even shaves his legs for online racing, and the former US National Road Race champion, looking like he's smiling. I can assure you he's doing anything but. Emanuel Bruckmann, the 27-year-old German, 4th in the Tour de France in 2019. A hill that awaits them after 20k is very much his kind of domain. A little less so perhaps for Bob Jungels, a man who flirted with the idea of challenging for Grand Tour general classification a little bit earlier on in his career. He is a classic star of some great ability. Bern Brussels Bern among his scalps over the years. JJ Rojas as well. He's out there on the balcony, maintaining social distancing. He's clearly at some altitude. He's going to gain some altitude a little bit later on as well. And he's going well. Now, Primož Roglič, a little while ago I had a look and he was sitting in 20th position. How is the great Slovenian rider, who is the delightful and delicious combination of a brilliant time trialist and an absolutely fabulous climber? And I think it'll be very interesting to see how he gets on later on. Will he be able to move his way up the order? He's up from 16th, or up to 16th from 20th. Nicola Conci, interesting rider with Trek Segafredo. Gave a great account of himself in the Giro d'Italia last year. He's stepped up to World Tour level now. He's indoors. So too is Pierre Latour. 700 metres his lead over Jimmy Whelan. And this is Huge gap at the moment. Jimmy Whelan is sitting in second place. Is putting himself in prime position to benefit when the gradient starts to rise. Nicholas Roach as well. They know how to measure this one. They know how to play it a little bit later on. 35-year-old Nicholas Roach, been a pro longer than any other Irish rider in history at this level, and he's in absolutely flying form. Finished 2019 in great shape. Took the lead of the Vuelta a España, led it for a while, ultimately crashed out of the final Grand Tour of last season, but carried a lot of, when he recovered, he had a lot of enthusiasm heading into this year, and clearly he's wintered well, maintained his strength and focus and fitness, and he's within about 60-70 meters of Jimmy Whelan at the moment. Kwiatkowski up to fourth, Warbas sitting in fifth, Zakarin in sixth, Brown, Badilati, Dillier, Craddock. That's your top 10 in the early stages of day 3 of this Digital Swiss 5. Kwiatkowski took that victory, his day of days, coming in Ponferrada back in 2014. He's been a consistent performer for Team Ineos in recent years. And San Remo in 2017. Amstel Gold being claimed by the Polish rider in 2015. He is such an all-rounder, an exceptional rider. His talent almost knows no bounds, and what an asset indeed he is for Team Ineos on the road. What an asset he is for the trio of Team Ineos riders that have been selected for today's encounter. He's accompanied on the start line by 2 Colombian riders, 2 young Colombians, Ivan Sosa and Sebastian Henao, 22 and 26 years of age respectively. And well, they're a little bit further back the order, but Kwiatkowski's in flying form in the early stages. 100% sure of what the situation in terms of where those Colombian riders are. They could well be at attitude. We have heard that's a bit of a disadvantage. There's your standings in the early stages. Pierre Latour flying with Nicholas Roach now moving ahead of Jimmy Whelan. It's a big bid from Nico. Larry Warbas, who's tasted success in the past in the Tour de Suisse. He took his first World Tour success indeed in Tour de Suisse in 2017, a mountain stage, got into the early break and really set him up, and it helped him to make the move up into World Tour with the AG Tour Le Mondial squad at the beginning of last year, and that was a big move for him. And Larry Warbas, a really popular member of the peloton, running in 4th place at the moment. We're on board with Latour of AG Tour Le Mondial. What's going to happen as we come into the latter stages? That hill is yet to come, and it's going to be a huge challenge. So a lot of what's been put down at the moment, but you've got to measure this one over 33.1 kilometers. And as I mentioned, the Newfoundland Pass is amongst the most daunting. It's only about 30 years old, this road, in actual fact. It took them a long time to get around to building it, and when they did, they didn't have an awful lot of tarmac to lay down, so they had to go the steep way up the hill. 1,500-meter gain for the riders, and they'll be rising up to a virtual 2,478 meters. The last 13 kilometers, I can tell you, average 8.45%, hitting gradients of around about 16.39%. Suffice it to say, it's a grippy one. And Whelan and Roach are engaged in that private little battle. It's a repeat of the battle that we saw in the first day of racing, Alex. Well, Alex is struggling for connection. He's in the rarefied atmosphere of Andorra. I'm not sure the ones and zeros are wafting their way out of his apartment and making it all the way to pick up on this at the moment. But hopefully we'll re-establish the connection with Alex Dowsett, and he can enjoy this fantastic 3rd day of racing in the Digital Swiss 5. JJ Rojas is piling on the pressure as well for the Movistar team. It's been a relatively subdued first couple of days of racing for the Spanish team, but can JJ Rojas reverse the trend a little bit? He's up in 7th position at the moment. Chris Hamilton for Team Sunweb had a pretty good day on the first day, finished 4th behind Nicholas Roach. So clearly the Sunweb squad have got themselves organized and understand how to work this Ruby platform, how to work digital racing in all its forms, and a little bit of a grouping together between Rojas, Hamilton, Dillier, all in Craddock indeed as well. Lawson Craddock sitting in 10th position for EF Pro Cycling. Dillier in 9th, riding with the Swiss national team, having been co-opted from his Agent de Mondial squad with whom he raced yesterday. And it's a solid effort being put down indeed by Dillier. Chris Hamilton, as I mentioned, in 8th, Rocas 7th, Ilnur Zakarin, a man who's enjoyed great success on Swiss roads in the Tour of Romandy in the past. And this virtual carrot of seeing your other competitors, the avatar just a little bit ahead, is it gives the riders a little bit of extra enthusiasm. That's the feedback that we're getting, Alex. I think we've re-established connection. And Alex, it does seem as if they it's not just exactly the same as a time trial effort.
No, not at all. It's more of a, even in a time trial, you have a lot going on mentally. There's a lot of distractions actually, where when I'm time trial, I think about a lot of things. I think about my pacing, I think about my cornering, where I am on the road, where the wind's coming from, my aerodynamic position. Here, these guys are in their garages, or you can see Dillier's in the studio. Larry Warbasser looks like maybe he's in his front room. Michael Kwiatkowski is in the gym, staring at a screen and a wall. This is as much of a battle of the head as it is the legs. I guess they're lucky really. They at least have something to hang on to, and that they can see the distances to the riders up ahead, and they can see the distances to the riders that are chasing them. So yeah, at least they have that. But yeah, this is a solo effort. Like, make no mistake of that. The only strategy here is pacing. And pacing across we're probably looking at an hour to an hour and a quarter effort here.
So maybe you need to get some sort of virtual reality glasses or something to wear during a time trial, where you've got a little avatar of your competitor just sitting in front of you. That will carrot up the road. Be a new marginal gain.
It's real. I mean, in a time trial, we often get splits, but the splits are only relative to the people that have ridden in front of you. I mean, if you're last man off, you'll know exactly where you are at 2 or 3 points along the time trial, depending on how long it is. But I mean, this is like a real-time one.
Maybe Adam Hansen, I think he might be the man to invent that. Well, yeah, I tell you what, the riders who are participating in the Digital Swiss 5 are spread across 22 different countries. They're racing from all over the world this week. It's absolutely fantastic. The race is being shown live on television in more than 30 countries. We're streaming live into many more countries, and we know that hundreds of thousands of people are logging in to watch the action on these various social media channels. We've picked up and collected some of the great contributions over the last couple of days from the riders.
Larry Warbas goes to extremes in his race preparations, as Dries de Vanens has found a novel way to warm up. Peo Bilbao is keeping it clean.
This is the least glamorous part of indoor cycling.
Great to see fans getting involved both near and far. The riders' gargantuan efforts being well received by the fans.
Yeah, caught my breath now. Yeah, wow, that was a hard one.
Riders who obviously have hidden talents. All in all, a wonderful way to stay in touch with our beloved sport for riders and fans alike.
Nice axe work by Nicola Conchi there, and everyone's really embracing this with vigour and enthusiasm, as there's your current standings. At this moment, 13 kilometres in, the gradient starts to grip now, as Nicholas Roach is the man who's leading the charge behind Pierre Latour. James Whelan sitting just behind him, and at a remove of, well, it's what, about 300-400 metres now, so it's quite an advantage being built up by Nicholas Roach over Jimmy Whelan. Larry Warbas sitting back in 4th place. Kwiatkowski, well, he's kept his powder dry so far as best he can, or has he? With Roach showing at just over 6 watts per kilo at the moment. James Whelan's about to get the gradient, and he's, what, about 4.65, so there is a little bit of a difference. This is clearly a big bid here from Nico Roach to hit the hill and try and establish a winning margin early on.
I'm actually quite surprised that the order is as it is as we come into the base of the climb, because from the profile it looks flat. Yeah, after yesterday's sort of smash fest from Stefan and Filippo Ganna with Michael Matthews and Van Avermaet chasing, I really thought we were going to see the likes of Ryan Mullen hitting the base of the slopes with a gap. You know, Ryan, you can churn out an enormous amount of watts, which on the flat, especially with no drafting, would be super handy. And then his you know, power to weight. There's the power aspect, but there's also the weight aspect, and that's where there's a shift when it comes to the climb. But I think there's certainly this gradient. This is what we like to call a false flat, where it's not flat and it's pretty unpleasant, and it's even more unpleasant knowing that it's even more unpleasant if you think it's going to be flat and it very much isn't. So I think that's what the riders have got at the moment. And you see Larry just easing past Jimmy Whelan there with Michael Kwiatkowski chasing. This is could have a battle royale here, and what's a nice looking Corvette just went by. Zakarin chasing them down as well, and I was teammates with Zakarin for a couple of years, and he's pretty formidable on the slopes. So we'll see if that translates here.
So Larry Warbath-Smith flashes, and he moves ahead of Jimmy Whelan, who finished third a few days ago, and gives a little wave to the camera as he does so. That was very impressive stuff from the former US national champion. Nico Roach is starting to make inroads now on Pierre Latour. Not entirely unexpected, I think. He's down to a gap, a margin indeed, of 452 metres, but he's opened up a gap of around about 400 or 500 metres on Larry Warbath. Warbath now ahead of Jimmy Whelan. Michał Kwiatkowski sitting in fifth for make that fourth. He's just moved ahead of Whelan. So Whelan looks like, well, is he measuring his effort nicely? Is he timing this nicely? He knows how to play the game, but maybe he's just starting to struggle a bit. This is an absolute beast of a hill, as indeed Lawson Craddock knows only too well. His teammate Jimmy Whelan's a little bit further up the road at the moment, but Lawson Craddock finished 9th on day one, which was a climbing day for the riders, so he knows just how to play this one. Dan Martin's new to virtual racing. I'm from Israel Startup Nation, also lives at altitude in Andorra region. Carl Frederick Hagen out of the saddle. It's not easy to do. It's sort of uncomfortable, almost unnatural, the way the bikes are bolted into those direct drive trainers. There's very little movement, but sometimes you've just got to get out and try and lever those pedals around. Matej Mohoric out on the balcony for the Bahrain team McLaren. Mohoric, the 25-year-old Slovenian, winner of the Big Bang Tour in 2018. This is a horse of a very different colour. And he's pushing on to try and get on terms with Nico Roach and the rest. Valentin Madouas, another French climber. He just, that's when it comes to the climbing, it is the natural inclination is to do maybe 15-20 seconds sitting down, another 15-20 seconds out of the saddle, and just have that natural rhythm. And the climbers, they often like to alternate. Some riders can spend an interminable amount of time out of the saddle. We think of Alberto Contador in the past being that style of a rider. So sitting on the home trainer just simply doesn't suit everyone, does it?
No, and the stage that Rowan won, and yesterday's stage as well, was definitely more suited to guys that would just. I think at the moment this platform is more suited to guys that can just sit and churn out the watts, because like you said, Declan, being out the saddle on a static trainer is very unnatural. Maybe that's we're into an era of online racing here. Maybe that's something to consider, like either becoming more efficient at being out the saddle on a bike that's not moving under you, or simply adapting starting to see products on the market where it's basically like a wobble board underneath you, where the whole bike and your trainer moves as you get out of the saddle, so to sort of help simulate what we do on the road.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether people are trying to design new positions, whether the saddle will point down and be shoved forward and almost into that sort of time trial or triathlon style position, or whether we're going to see people almost thinking about adopting a recumbent position. We might well see lots of different extremes appearing. Latour continues to lead. Roach in second place ahead of Larry Warbass now. Ilnur Zakharin has moved up into fourth position for the CCC team. The Russian rider always brings his A game to Switzerland, even if he's not in Switzerland. Michał Kwiatkowski sitting in fifth place at the moment for Team Ineos. Jimmy Whelan is slipping down the order, falling into the clutches of his fellow countryman Chris Hamilton, who was fourth on the first day, currently sits seventh for Team Sunweb. Sylvain Dillier giving a great account of himself with the Swiss national team. The AG Tour Le Mondial rider sitting in eighth. JJ Rojas in ninth at the moment. Jonas Vingegaard for the Team Jumbo-Visma squad is ahead of his team leader, and indeed one of the heroes of international road racing, Primož Roglič, the Slovenian rider, just outside the top 10 at the moment, but starting to make inroads. Started relatively slowly in comparison with some of the other riders, and I think that's been the learning experience for a lot of riders who are new to online racing, that the starts are just vicious. It's absolutely out of the gates, like the race only lasts for 500 meters, and then somehow sustain that for 33.
It sounds pretty unpleasant when you put it like that. Start as hard as you can and then hang on.
Yeah, it's dog driving.
I think it's worth chatting about the tech side of this, and obviously all these riders are all on different trainers, different power meters, and he gets up, and all the trainers and power meters are all calibrated within a couple of watts of each other. But it's worth sort of chatting about how do you get the most out of yourself on a platform like this? So on the road, we look at aerodynamics, we look at cooling, we look at the clothing we're wearing, the rigidity of the wheels and the weight, whereas online racing brings a much different set of problems to try and optimize. Now, one of the things is drivetrain efficiency, and I've spoken about this the last couple of days, and each day I keep asking someone new about how do you maximize the power you're putting through the pedals. How does that translate into the most amount of power that is produced on screen? And well, the first thing is to look at whether you run the power meter from whether you use the power meter from the smart trainer or you use the power meter from your cranks. And logic would suggest that you should use the power meter from your cranks because it's measuring the power earlier. Now, when you press down on the pedal, that power is translated from your foot to your shoe, to the pedal, to the crank, to the chain ring, to the chain, then that goes to the cassette, and then that goes into the turbo trainer, or if you're on the road, the rear wheel. Every step of that process, there will be a marginal loss in power output. It's unavoidable, but the best systems lose the least amount, and this is called drivetrain efficiency. So this is where we'd start introducing things like ceramic bearings and a wax chain to optimize that drivetrain. And so if the riders are using the power meter from their smart trainer, these are things that the riders and their teams should really be looking at. Whereas if I asked Dan Martin which power meter he's using, and he said he's going to use the crank-based power meter because he hasn't got a new chain and the drivetrain isn't optimized, so it makes more sense for him to use that, which I would imagine most of the riders are doing the same. Now, Jimmy said to me the other day that his power meter and he recorded the ride twice, so by his cranks and by his trainer, and it recorded the same power output to 1 watt, which is that's perfect basically. So I think it's encouraging to hear that Jimmy is getting some very consistent readings there, and it's good for his peace of mind also. This looks like a pretty brutal effort for Sylvain Dillier here, but you can see here that the chain going to the turbo trainer at the back there's always going to be a loss there, which is why you'd want to use the power meter on the cranks if you can.
Yeah, Sylvain Dillier in a world of hurt at the moment, but he's going pretty well in this. He's currently sitting in 7th place. The AG Tour Le Mondial rider. He's got his Swiss national colours on today because he's representing the Swiss national squad. He's in studio with our Swiss TV colleagues and enjoying the experience. And we have had a change at the top of the standings, I can tell you. At the moment, it's showing Nicolas Roche ahead of Larry Warbass. So Roche and Latour has dropped away from our screens, and I think there could well be a bit of information around that. We understand, and it's just coming through to us now, that the calibration of Pierre Latour's trainer has been checked and found to be incorrect. So change at the top of the standings as the climb starts to grip. Nicolas Roche ahead of Larry Warbass as this gets into the business end of this race, this third race in the Digital Swiss 5.
Just see Ryan Mullen, a good friend of mine, snuck into the top 10 now, and it is something I hoped we'd see as the bigger riders on the flat really making inroads. As I said before, I don't think this flat is quite as flat as the profile may suggest. But Ryan sat on some high, even though like the watts per kilo look relative, but Ryan's 5 watts per kilo will be a lot higher in terms of power output, a lot higher than say Roglic's, for example. And I think now that we've literally just hit these slopes and we're sitting on 10% slope at the moment, that's going to completely mix up the standings with the heavier riders really struggling in comparison to the light whippets up the front.
Oh, look at the way that the avatars, the cadence has just reduced to a crawl for Nicolas Roche. It's impressive stuff. He's got 350 meters on Larry Warbass in the lead of this race. 375 back to Michał Kwiatkowski, who's come with a bit of a run now. Within 30-40 meters of second position. Ilnur Zakarin sitting in at 4th. Jimmy Whelan steadied the ship a little bit. He slipped back to 6th, which is of course now 5th. Ahead of Sylvain Dillier, Chris Hamilton in 7th, JJ Rocas in 8th. Ryan Mullen, as you mentioned, in 9th place, is just over 600 meters to find to get to the front of this race. His fellow countryman Nicolas Roche leading at the moment, and Primož Roglic is just over 700 meters behind the lead, sitting in 10th place, the reigning champion of Vuelta a España, a man who's enjoyed some pretty good days out in the Tour of Romandy, twice a winner indeed of the second of those big stage races in Switzerland, the Tour de Suisse, of course, the national tour being the king of them. And there you see the riders in their little pain caves, thrashing away, loads of different styles, loads of different characters of ways of pedaling the bike. So the bike is absolutely welded before. Roche putting out 6.2, 6.3 watts per kilo. Similar sort of outputs from Larry Warbass, and they're on similar gradients at this moment as we see Ilnur Zakarin moving up onto the shoulder of Michał Kwiatkowski. We've had a change for the final podium position with Zakarin moving up and into 3rd place. The CCC man measuring his effort nicely. Kwiatkowski not enjoying the gradient at this moment. We're hitting slopes of around about 5-6% at the moment. Indeed, above, to remind you, average stroke rate of time for 50% hit is 16%. It was a really, really tough race.
The slopes here, where the riders will really hit them for 6 hitting these slopes, because the smart trainers, the resistance on the smart trainer will change according to the slope. So as we hit this 10% slope, the rider's going to have to shift down the gears, like we would do in the real world. But when you're seeing this on a screen and your physical body isn't changing angle to go uphill, it just feels like it comes at you like a ton of bricks, and these riders are all already on their threshold, on their limit, and then for suddenly a load of resistance to be poured onto the turbo trainer, it really is going to make life just really tough in the head, because I mean ultimately all they need to do is shift down a few gears and settle back into their rhythm. But it's yeah, just this mental battle that the riders have. This hitting these slopes really won't help.
It's a mental battle. It's also a physical battle, and we're seeing some great physical specimens at their work today. Very important to get the drinks in, and we see that LAWSON CRADDOCK, who was sitting well to the fore, he's slipped out of the top 10 at the moment, but he's taken the opportunity to take on a drink. And chatting to Nicholas Roach a little bit earlier on today, I can tell you, he said it's really important. He said he drank 4 bottles during an online race with, just a few days ago, and some of his mates were saying, well, you wouldn't drink 4 bottles in a 5-hour training ride. It's remarkable just how much you put out in just an hour of racing.
And it's also because there's less to think about as well. You know, on the road you have more distractions than here. I'm not saying it's a boredom thing, but you're so focused on one thing, being just delivering that power, that it's easy for your mind to wander, and you know, just taking a drink can break up the monotony of the effort as well. And also, like, out on a 4-hour ride, often you're with people, you know, you're chatting away, sort of, hours really go by quickly, so you can forget, and just simply forget to have a drink. And whereas here, you know, the riders will be very, very self-aware of what's going on, very looking for what's going to help me, what's going to help this, either what's going to help me go faster or what's going to help this hurt less. And yeah, taking some electrolytes on board and taking some energy drink. That's part of it. So they'll do this. We've got Nino Schurter here who's taking his hat off for calling, just having a chat.
Yeah, just dangling over the brake. That would annoy me, but I don't think he can even see it at this stage. 33 years of age, mountain bike superstar, and Nino Schurter sitting in 18th position at the moment, just under a kilometre behind the race leader, Nicholas Roach. Schurter of the Swiss national team, while he's chatting away, manages to move ahead of Matthew Cattaneo from the Declining Quickstep squad. So impressive that he's able to, maybe it's just a little distraction of having a little bit of conversation has actually helped him to increase his efforts and maintain the power.
Yeah, quite possibly, although taking, yeah, if he chats to, sort of speaks out a sentence a bit too long and that just has to catch his breath, he'll know about that pretty quickly.
It is remarkable stuff, isn't it? It just shows you that this is an aerobic effort, an aerobic effort as opposed to an anaerobic effort. They are able to manage a few words of conversation despite the fact that they're putting out north of 6 watts per kilo, 6.4 watts and the rest. 6.44 Nicholas Roach, comparable output to Larry Warbass, who's still maintaining a distance around about 350. Well, it's gone out to 400 metres now between Roach and Larry Warbass. So a little bit of a gain for the leader within the last kilometre, but not yet a winning advantage, you would say. He's still maintaining the advantage, and Emil Zakarin hit to find to get there. It's Matthias Frank is delighted to get going. He struggled indeed to get off the line on the first day, but he's back in toward him on the Owl outfit, former Swiss champion. He's got plenty of Swiss flags and plenty of supporters there.
Big old smile on his face as well. I'm not sure who's enjoying this more, his family. I presume it's his family or him.
Larry Warbass, the man who shaved his legs for online racing, and talk about marginal gains. Seems to be working at the moment. Toward him on the rider, though it looks like he's coming under attack from Ilnur Zakarin, CCC rider, the Russian rider, about to get on terms with the American and overtaken. Zakarin knows how to time an effort. The 30-year-old Russian, winner of Tour of Romandie back in 2015. He's taken 2 stages of Giro d'Italia in his career, including a great mountain assault last year in 2019. That was the overall race lead for a day or two. Neil Kwiatkowski is not out of this one either. He's within 20-40 metres of Zakarin. And Hamilton in 5th place at the moment. His teammate, Nicholas Roach, is in flying form. Hamilton heading towards another top 6 to match his 6th place finishing performance from day one, albeit he's got to find 670 odd meters to get on terms with the leader. Here's the man who's on a charge, Jonas Vingegaard from the Team Jumbo-Visma squad, just over 700 meters behind the race leader, within about 20-30 meters of the 6th place at the moment. And Jimmy Whelan is going well. He's the man that you had a chat with a little bit earlier on today, Alex.
Yeah, I had a chat with Jimmy Whelan earlier, and yeah, we talked about the sort of intricacies of this racing and what it's like to race on a static trainer. So here's the chat.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it I think during the race. I watched the replay. It's the bike doesn't move, so it's a very different feel. But I find the torque a little bit easier to deal with when I'm out of the saddle than in the saddle. I think I need to get onto the TT bike a bit more over the next few weeks just to make sure my seated power is back to normal again. But yeah, I think for the whole race yesterday, I mean not yesterday, but 2 days ago for stage 1, I averaged like 72 cadence or something, which is pretty low.
Yeah, is that better for online racing though? Do you think? Have you had to adapt your style at all to accommodate for trying to make the most out of the indoor racing as opposed to outdoors?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the technical answer for it, but I know just from a few virtual races that I've done over the last few weeks, I tend to put out better power when I'm out of the saddle, especially at that high wattage. As soon as I get under threshold, I like to be seated, but as you saw on stage 1, a lot of it was pretty hard. So yeah, I found myself out of the saddle, and I think it's a bit of a runner's thing as well. You see Mike Woods, he spends a lot of his time when he's doing some pretty big efforts out of the saddle, so it seems to be a bit of a running thing as well.
Impressive stuff from Jimmy Whelan, impressive moustache as well. He's got an interesting tonsorial setup for virtual racing. It's effective indeed, and the man who was third on the first day for EF Pro Cycling, giving us some fantastic insights. Great conversation with Alex a little bit earlier on today. Running in 7th place at the moment, 1.18 kilometers behind this man, Nicholas Roach, who's still managing to tap out this consistent 6 watts per kilo. It's an intense effort. Indeed, speaking with Nicholas a little earlier on, he suggested that he's going to focus a little more on the time trial between now and next year as well. He's going to go back to it. He's former national champion. Of course, his friend and rival, who was in the top 10 for a little while, Ryan Mullen, is the current Irish national time trial champion. But Nicholas Roach has his eyes on that prize and perhaps 1 or 2 other assaults as well. Well, it's a pretty decent time trial effort that he's doing at the moment, because his advantage over the new 2nd place man, Ilnur Zakarin of the CCC squad, is maintaining it just on around about 400 meters. I think Zakarin could be coming with a bit of a run here, and there's plenty of time to go on this hill. There's still a long way remaining, 25 of the 33 kilometers remaining, still about 8k to go.
It's a long 8k as well. I mean, Nicholas is sat at just the riders are sat at 12 kilometers an hour here, so we're still looking at half an hour of racing maybe left. That's which would put this on the longest stage so far, even though it's quite a considerable shorter distance than yesterday. In terms of time, this will be substantially longer. I chatted to sort of a major bike manufacturer's boss the other day on what would make the perfect online racing bike, because all of these riders are riding their team bikes, which they're optimized for weight, aerodynamics and rigidity, and often compromises and concessions are made from one to help another. So obviously the more rigid you make a bike means you have to pack it with more carbon, which means it'll become heavier. So there really is a fine balance to all these bikes on how the stiffness versus the weight versus the aero. Obviously, weight and aero is not a factor here. So really, what this guy Rob said is that the perfect bike for online racing would be a steel bike, just because of the sheer rigidity of it. So, I wonder in the future, as online racing becomes much more of a sort of a staple part of the racing community and the racing calendar, I wonder if manufacturers will start making steel bikes specifically for online racing, but then also shifting the positions of riders, because again, the cyclists' positions are optimized often for aerodynamics. So I think you mentioned it earlier, Declan, could we be seeing riders in a recumbent position or certainly much more upright? And just looking at all the gains there, it's fascinating. And he also mentioned through axle versus quick release. So you don't need brakes, obviously, because the riders in their garages are not traveling anywhere, but a through axle as opposed to a quick release, a through axle is far more rigid. So that point of connection between the bike and the trainer, if you have a through axle connection rather than a quick release, you're going to be helping that power get from the drivetrain, from the crankset through to the turbo trainer. So it's it could be a fascinating time for innovation on the online racing platforms.
Yes, you feel like you're at the dawn of a new era, don't you? And that the innovation is going to be at an alpine scale, not dissimilar to the sort of precipice that these riders are riding up at the moment. It'll be a similar scale of change in the sort of vehicles that they're using to get the power down and get it into the cranks and get it by a virtual means out and into the world. And Nicholas Roach is doing a pretty solid job at the moment for the Team Sunweb squad. His advantage still maintaining, indeed, if anything, extending a little bit. Now, he did have the advantage of the gradient plateauing a little bit and then ramping up again to more than 10%. At one point a few moments ago, it was up around 13-14%. It's leveled off again ever so slightly down to around sort of 6-7%, and then goes up. So it's kind of up and down, but his consistent output is around about the 6 watts per kilo mark. So it's a fabulous performance at the moment from Nicholas Roach. Ilnur Zakarin sitting just over 400 meters back. Laurie Warbast for the AG Tour Le Mondial squad running in the second. Problem there. As we see Will Barta, the US rider, the CCC rider, just having a little momentary electronical, but I think he'll be able to get back up and running very shortly. We certainly hope. Indeed, Ilnur Zakarin, his teammate, is handily placed, so we hope that he just has a solid connection between himself and the world.
It's very, very recognisable style from Adam Yates there. A low cadence, out the saddle. I'd imagine he's a bit more uncomfortable doing that on a static bike as opposed to being out on the road, but still trying to adopt his regular style to this racing.
Yes, that's another reason, I suppose, that the time trial riders might just have something of an advantage coming into this, because just that ability to maintain one position, given that their bicycle is maintaining one position, whether they like it or not, it could well be, they can focus absolutely every joule of energy into the cranks in the most efficient way without the bike moving around under them, and that just is probably a slightly handy advantage.
Well, I've just had some interesting information come in from former teammate of mine, Ian Boswell, who's he's retired as a pro. He's now into gravel racing. I was asking him about the turbo trainers, and something that happens with regular power meters is heat can affect the calibrations. If something heats up, then parts can expand, and the technicalities of power meter, there's lots of very tiny parts moving to give a very and they can be very sensitive to change, which is why you have to calibrate them quite regularly. Now, there's some power meters, if you say you're out on a ride and you stop for a coffee, you leave the bike in the sun, the heat of the sun's hitting the bike, that power meter can then read differently when you start going again, unless you recalibrate it because of the change in heat. And so it got me thinking, with these smart trainers, there's heat generated. there's heat generated all the time on these smart trainers, just by the nature of them. And what Ian said, from what he knows, is that the power meter inside the trainer, it auto calibrates itself for the heat. So on screen you won't see any change in power after you've got it up to, after you've been riding it for 10-15 minutes and everything's heated up. There won't be a change in the power output, which is obviously what you'd expect from technology of this technology this advanced. But it's comforting to know that your numbers will always stay consistent, and especially when you're watching the online racing, it's comforting to know that from this perspective as well.
Technical stuff, and comforting for us. Not so comfortable at the moment for Chris Hamilton, but it's a solid job being done, and he's at a great old scrap at the moment with Jonas Vingegaard, who came shooting up the order for Team Jumbo-Visma. His much vaunted and much better known teammate Primoz Roglic just slipped out of the top 10. He slipped down the order a little bit. It looked like he was just working his way up the order and going well indeed, but I can tell you Primoz Roglic has slipped down into 20th position, 1.37 kilometers behind your current race leader Nicolas Roche. Meanwhile, Jonas Vingegaard is leading the charge for Team Jumbo-Visma, sitting 830, 738, that kind of number behind the race leader Nicolas Roche at the moment. Jimmy Whelan is sitting in 7th place. Early on, he was running in 2nd place, then 3rd, and slipped down the order to 6th. And as I said, seemed to steady the ship at that moment. He's still very much in the hunt and within touching distance indeed of Vingegaard, and ahead of Hermann Pernsteiner by about 60-70 meters. Still all to play for. The virtual helicopter picks out Roman Kreuziger, former winner of the Tour de Suisse. He's a veteran rider now with the NTT Pro Cycling squad, the 33-year-old Czech rider on Tour de Suisse just over 10 years ago. Well, now still goal back in 2013 as well. Nino Schurter is still ploughing on regardless, and doing some solid work in 21st position. Over 5 watts per kilo as well for him, and that's pretty impressive numbers. But up front there, well, if anything, he might have slipped back a little bit. We're seeing Nicolas Roche south of 6 watts per kilo a little bit more often than we're seeing him above that. But for all that, it's a similar sort of depletion in the wattage output from his nearest rivals as well. Ilnur Zakarin is just below 6 watts per kilo at the moment. Larry Warbass just on 6. Just dipping below 6 watts a little bit more often than it was in the lower slopes of this climb. So it's really starting to hurt. I mean, it's such a challenge. Just coming up on 28 kilometers completed of the 33 and a bit kilometers they have to go. Still 5K of this beast of a climb. The Nufenen Pass claimed a few victims today. And they've got, it's always the cruel reality of cycling, isn't it? That the worse you are at doing it, the longer you have to sit out there suffering in pain. Nicolas Roche solo in his effort, apart from the day trippers out for a ride, a promenade in their vehicles up the hill.
It looks like Ilnur Zakarin's just closed up that gap a little bit. Not much, but just passing a nice motorbike gang there out from the road to Switzerland. Just closed up on Nicolas just a little bit, so maybe starting to make inroads there, and that could be the sign of pacing, a different pacing strategy. In fact, this top 10 has changed, with the exception of the top couple of riders. This top 10's changed quite a bit. Seeing Louis Menchez and Rein Taramay popping up there, and that's indicative of the lesser gradients at the start of the stage versus these much harsher gradients, and the fact that watts per kilo becomes a much bigger factor in how this race plays out.
Yeah, Louis Menke is far from a big man. The South African rider back with Africa's team, NTT Pro Cycling as it's called these days. MTM Quebec is where he began his career. He moved off to the Italian squad for a couple of years and then back to what's now known as NTT Pro Cycling, and going well as things currently stand in 9th position, just under a kilometre behind Nicholas Roach. Rein Taramai, the Estonian rider from Total Direct Energy. Similarly, what, about 40-50 metres behind Louis Menkes. James Whelan now down in 8th. He's been replaced in 7th position by Hermann Pernsteiner from the Bahrain McLaren squad. Decent effort indeed from the 29-year-old Austrian Pernsteiner with the Bahrain McLaren team, but it's CCC's Ilnur Zakarin that we focus on for a little while. A couple of stage wins in the Giro, Tour de Romandie, stage win in Tour de France as well, of course, back in 2016. Tour of Azerbaijan, make a list. He's won many one-week stage races. He's performed with great distinction over 3 weeks as well, and he's performing with impressive facility in this 3rd day of racing in the digital Swiss 5, which has really captured the imagination of so many people around the world. It's bringing the cycling community together in a virtual sense from at least 22 countries represented, 22 different countries. The signals are being sent into this game, and it's Nicholas Roach, who's based in Monaco, flying solo in every sense. He lives alone, so it's been a quiet enough 5 weeks for Nico, and he's getting plenty of training done, and clearly it's showing to good effect. His advantage over Zakarin hasn't dipped below 400 meters anytime recently. He's managing to hang on to this effort. 15-16 kilometers an hour on a gradient that is around about 10-11% at the moment is impressive stuff. Try that at home, and be impressed if you can make it last for more than about 100 meters. Maybe not you, Alex.
You look at the watts per... Sorry, you look at the watts per kilo these guys are churning out, and they are, yeah, this is world-class stuff we're seeing. Online racing is, I think you can't, this is a race, this is a legitimate race, and there'll be a very deserving winner at the end, and I think anyone in the top 10 will be should be super proud of their efforts. We can't compare it to racing that we would tend to be useful, but that's not to discredit this at all. I think online bike racing is much closer to the real thing than, for example, FIFA is to football. And I think we're lucky that we have this platform that we can still keep the competitive nature going. A lot of other sports at this time, in this current climate, would really be struggling to cobble anything together. We're fortunate that we have a sport to watch here.
No UCI points on offer here, of course, but national governing bodies, several national governing bodies indeed have instituted and created national championships for online racing in the last year or so, and it's certainly a developing side of the sport. Dillier continues his pain and suffering. Dillier back in 17th position for the Swiss national team at the moment. You can see on screen he's just behind JJ Roca, just ahead of Jorge Arcas, as Nicholas Roach up front manages to reach 29.5 kilometers of racing. So within the final, 3.5, 4 kilometers, that's a long way on a climb of this difficulty. And you see the serpentine nature of this climb as it winds and twists its way up and over the Neufenen Pass, one of the most important passes in this part of Switzerland. Most important access roads to other parts of the Alps. There's the 16. Riders continuing to thresh out. Go ahead there, Alex.
Yeah, any climb with the word "pass" in it is the sort of thing that sends shivers down my spine.
Pass, as in, yeah, I think I'll pass on it. Where possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. Larry's got his sunglasses on. Must be real sunny indoors for him.
He's a character, isn't he? And his day of days did come, of course, in Tour de Suisse back in 2017. That stage victory really accelerated his career into a new place. He then went on to win the US National Road Race Championship and has spent a year in Stars and Stripes. Still has the evidence of that on the sleeves of his AG2 Orlemont, the Al skin suit. And he's now with the World Tour squad with the AG Tour Le Mondial team, and he's settled down. And he's showing the jersey well today for AG Tour Le Mondial, up in third place, and a podium beckons. What about JJ Rojas? Is he enjoying this climb? Perhaps a little less so. The Movistar rider, and you wouldn't ordinarily say that he would love the mountains, certainly not in comparison with some of the mountain goats. He is, though, pro bike rider of some great repute, and sitting in 16th position at the moment. Roglic has slipped down the order. He's 19th, the winner and the reigning champion of the Vuelta a España, long-time leader of last year's Giro d'Italia. Nicola Conci, an emerging professional rider, moved up to Trek Segafredo this year. He's indoors, he's got the sounds. I wonder, is that a recording of his own axe work that he's listening to there? Perhaps not.
This will be a nice sight for Nico Roach. 3k to go banner, maybe.
Yeah, he's clocking them down, isn't he? One by one. Just these challenges. He's breaking this road up into kilometre after kilometre, and well, he's suffering, but you know what? He's getting great heart from the fact that he's maintaining his advantage, and it's still sitting. It's extending, if anything. He's still managing to crank out well north of 5 watts. He's dipping above 6 watts per kilogram on a regular basis. And Roach is secure in first place. Zakarin, it's been a great afternoon for him, the way that he has gravitated up through the order. LAWSON CRADDOCK, he's got the sunnies out as well, showing the jersey, showing the colours. The EF Pro Cycling squad certainly embraced virtual racing with some enthusiasm, and CRADDOCK, the 28-year-old American rider, 6th in the individual time trial at the World Championships last year. He doesn't mind a test. Former national champion, of course. You got the jersey in the background there. Dan Martin. He's not too far away from you in Andorra, Alex, and if the elevated status of where he's based could be having an effect. He's a super climber, 2-time Tour de France stage winner.
Yeah, being at altitude, whilst it's great for training, for online racing, it's nothing short of a disadvantage. I don't know the exact height Dan's at, maybe 1,500 meters, which, you know, you're looking at a 10% loss in your threshold, which, you know, nothing gets adjusted accordingly on online racing. So you are literally just running at a 10% deficit to your sea level power output. So it's yeah, makes racing considerably tougher.
Certainly does, and he's sitting a little bit further back the order than he would like at the moment. But of course, it's his first appearance in the Digital Swiss 5 as well. So many of these riders will have been out on the first day, and understanding how to measure your effort, how to play the game is also something that is acquired with experience. And Michał Kwiatkowski is the third rider to reach the banner that tells us it's 3 kilometers to go. Nicolas Roach is well under that at this stage. And Roach has a 377-meter advantage over Zakarin. If anything, it's coming down. I wonder, is he getting slightly distracted as a response as he goes up over 6 watts per kilo? Carl Frederick Hagen is going to try and do the rest of the climb out of the saddle, which is not easy. He's got the fan there. Everybody you speak to says, when you go online racing, get yourself a really big desk fan, put it up to level 5 or above, because if you don't have the cooling effect of the wind, the natural effect that you get when you're traveling across the tarmac, it's pretty tough. And Matej Mohoric is, well, he's feeling the pinch a little bit. He's a little bit hot under the collar.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some quite big names struggling, and that is because it's just a completely different style of race. You look at riders like Matej Mohoric, Adam Yates, Dan Martin. They're racers. They thrive off of strategy. They thrive off of, but they're punchy as well. They like the accelerations, and this style of racing is more to do with just sat on your threshold, churning out big watts for a long time, which is why we've seen 2 time trialists win the previous 2 stages. I mean, Nicolas, he can do a very good time trial. You wouldn't class him as a time trialist, but he can time trial well. And these, you know, we're looking at guys who have great figures, can do great functional threshold power tests, and have a solid sort of watts per kilo as well. And that's it's mixing up the races. These like Adam and Dan probably will come away from this and might be quite happy to not see one again. But then you'll have obviously guys like Nicholas Roach that really thrive off of this and said, okay, that's for me.
Yeah, something he was saying earlier as well is that some riders have their pride. They just and something we saw yesterday. Nico's good friend Michael Matthews just refused to capitulate when Greg Van Avermaet, who's a big rival of his on the road, they would often be in the same race at the same time and bidding for victory in similar races, and the two of them found themselves shoulder to shoulder in a virtual sense in day 2, and there's no way that Matthews was giving up that. It was the battle for a podium position in a virtual race, and it was as intense as anything you would see in one of the major monument classics, and Matthews eventually prevailing over the Olympic champion, but quite the scrap. Good to see.
You could almost see that it was getting personal. It was really became a sort of a watts per kilo match fest, where Michael would lift it a bit, Greg would respond, lift it a bit more, Michael would lift it a bit more than that, then they'd both slow down and just keep repeating it. You just couldn't separate them. It was really a fantastic watch, and up until 200 meters to go, still weren't sure what was going to happen, and then Michael released 10 watt per kilo sprint, and Greg couldn't respond. And that's the thing with this kind of race, you can be in the mix at the end, and if you're going toe to toe with someone's always going to be just that little bit stronger. And I've done online racing. When you're on your limit, you don't have a sprint at the end. You've got nothing. Whereas if you're sat there matching someone and you've just slightly got the measure of them, then you can you can lift it at the end and really do some damage. Nino Schurter is another example. He had a fantastic start, but mountain biking is a very surgy affair. It's you're either really on the power or you're really like recovering and going through some technical sections. It's there's not so much of this sustained power. So I wouldn't imagine he's enjoying life currently. This is very unfamiliar territory for him. The bike's not moving under him at all. There's not a great deal to think about outside of his own effort. I think wherever he's doing this, he's got a couple of people to talk to, which hopefully is keeping him occupied. But this is going to be tough on the head for Nino, and a very unfamiliar kind of effort.
Der Flüssigkeitsverlust ist auch bei Ihnen enorm.
Ja, extrem. Nothing left in that feed on. I hope someone reaches down and gives it to him, because he's not going to be able to do it himself at the moment.
2 Kilo geschwitzt. Das Rennen ist ja auch länger, als Sie es eigentlich befürchtet haben,
to smile, because this is an absolutely savage effort from Schurter. He's been a nice little private battle indeed, isn't he, with Carl Frederick Hagen, Will Bart as well, within a few meters. Simon Yates about, about 100 meters up the road, and just behind them in 25th position is Wilco Kelderman, another man within 10 meters or so of this little three-way scrap for 22nd position. So battles throughout the field, but it's been all about one man since the early stages, since the departure of Pierre Latour. It's been all about Nicholas Roach of Team Sunweb, who established an advantage of over 400 meters at one stage. I can tell you, it's just clipped back to around about 358 the meters. So could this be the sign of a surge from Ilnur Zakarin? Similar wattage outputs at the moment from the two. Or is this just the effect of different gradients being experienced by the riders at the moment? The gap coming down. This is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I wonder if Nico's watching Ilnur's, watching the gap and watching Ilnur's watts per kilo, because they can see, all the riders can see the same screens as we're looking at now. And Nicola still has a healthy gap. 300, 400 meters on a climb, that feels like eternity. Probably more so for me than like climbers, but it's still, when you're going this slowly up a hill, obviously everything takes longer. So I wonder if Nico, he might be struggling, or he might just be measuring his effort now against Zach's, knowing that he's got this comfortable gap to maintain.
Yeah, looks in good shape at the moment. He's in under the kite within the final kilometre now for Nicholas Roach of Team Sunweb. His advantage stabilising at around about 350 odd metres over Ilnur Zakarin. It hasn't fluctuated hugely, maybe by what, 50, 60 metres, depending on the gradient throughout this absolutely awesome, monstrous climb, the Nuffenen Pass, famous in the Tour de Suisse over many, many years. Made its first appearance when it was used on a different road back in 1972. We've seen some big names in the sport who've performed with great distinction. Ex-American marketer Fabio Parra back in 1987 was first over the top of the Nuffenen. Stefano Garzali 3 times in succession for the Italian rider at the end of the last century and into the beginning of this new millennium. Nicholas Roach is the man who's going to take the victory in virtual terms. It seems assured now. 342 metres for Nicholas Roach as he's down to the last 400 or 500 metres of racing through and heading under the kite with the final kilometre remaining for Ilnur Zakarin. Behind him, Larry Warbass has maintained a gap of around about 50 metres or so. So it's been a solid effort by Larry Warbass, and impressively so, and he could well still have a little bit in the tank. We'll watch out for the former US champion Larry Warbass of AG2R Le Mondial. Can he get up to Ilnur Zakarin? Can he hold off Chris Hamilton? Well, that looks, if not assured, a little bit more likely. He's got about 130 metres on the 4th place man, as Larry Warbass at the moment. Chris Hamilton in turn in 4th place for Team Sunweb has about 40 odd metres on Jimmy Whelan. Whelan is on the comeback trail. He's measured this one nicely. The man who finished 3rd a couple of days ago. Is it possible that he could get up for a late bid for glory in that position? Well, he's not going to be able to do anything about this, man, because Nicholas Roach is within the final 150 metres. He's heading towards the finish. He's powering it through, still at 6 odd watts per minute. He's going to take day 3 of the Digital Swiss 5. It's Ireland's Nicholas Roach for Team Sunweb that gets the victory, gets the arms in the air, and he can finally take some relief from that effort. Down in Monaco, Nicholas Roach has made his bid. He's got himself fit. He's been putting up 23 odd hours of cycling on the turbo trainer each week, and it's certainly showing to good effect today. He's got the win on day 3. Who's going to be second? Ilnur Zakarin has about 40 odd metres advantage over Larry Warbass, who's really putting on a bit of a charge here. He can see Zakarin ahead. He's got the advantage of seeing that carrot coloured indeed, Zakarin in the CCC colours. The Russian rider, can he hang on from this late charge from Larry Warbass? Hamilton, I can tell you, has got about 40 metres on James Whelan, who's starting to really power on here. But Warbass wants to try and get to Zakarin. Too little too late, I think. It's still going to be a podium for him, but it's Ilnur Zakarin who's going to take 2nd on the day for the CCC squad. The Russian rider inside the final 75 metres. His effort is complete. It's been a solid first appearance in Digital Swiss 5 racing for the CCC rider. And Larry Warbass, just a few seconds removed. Fabulous effort from the American. He gets home in 3rd. That's your podium. Nicholas Roach gets the win from Ilnur Zakarin and Larry Warbass as we await the arrival. It's going to take a while for all of them to come up here, I can tell you. It's the next rider up for 4th position, Chris Hamilton, showing well, and it's been a good old couple of days racing indeed, hasn't it, for Team Sunweb. Both Hamilton and Roach bringing their A game to this event, and Whelan, another strong performance and another good showing from the young Australian rider. Man from Melbourne, 23 years of age, home in 5th place for EF Pro Cycling. Good response indeed, good recovery from the young rider. Next up, very shortly we believe, will be Michał Kwiatkowski. Is he going to be able to hold off Hermann Pernsteiner? Indeed he is. He's home and hosed, is the 2014 World Road Race champion in 6th position. Pernsteiner is the next rider scheduled to appear at the line. Bahrain McLaren rider has a bit of an advantage over Louis Menkes of NTT Pro Cycling. Man to watch out for, I think, perhaps on the final day of racing in a couple of days' time. Could be another opportunity for this South Africa, but it's Pernsteiner's through for a great top 10 finish, 7th place on the day for the Bahrain McLaren rider. Louis Menkes from South Africa. Diminutive climber of some ability. He stands tall in the world of mountain climbing, and Louis Menkes brings it across the line for Africa's team in 8th position. Rein Taramai is another rider who's made his way up the order throughout the day, and riding with Total Direct Energy, the French pro-continental team. First of the Division 2 level riders who've made it through to the line. So solid performance from Rein Taramai, the Estonian. Next up, Gavin Mannion, US rider for rally cycling, making another pro-conti rider in the top 10 and backing up a couple of top 10 performances from teammates in yesterday's race. Oh, a little wheelie to celebrate from Gavin Mannion. What did he lift the front wheel off the floor at home? Valentin MADOUAS is just outside the top 10. Next man we're expecting to see is Jonas Vingegaard, who dropped away a little bit at the back end, but it's your top 10 confirmed. Nicholas Roach getting the win from Ilnur Zakarin, Larry Warbass in 3rd, Chris Hamilton just outside the podium position. Solid effort from the Team Sunweb man. Jimmy Whelan, Michal Kwiatkowski, Herman Pernsteiner, Louis Menkes, Rein Taramai, Gavin Mannion and Valentin MADOUAS. That's your top 10 on day 3 of the Digital Swiss 5. It's been another super job by all the riders, but not least Nicholas Roach, who certainly did bring his A-game to this, Alex.
Oh, absolutely. He took it on quite early, and yeah, really, he got his gap. He got his big gap at the bottom of the climb, really, and then just maintained it to the top. So, and Zach, but he had a little worry near the end. Zakarin was coming back at him, but Nicholas just managed the gap and deliver it to the line, despite Ilnur Zakarin rushing up on him.
Oh, see what you did there? Good old push from Zakarin. Been waiting all year for that, right? Entire career.
Oh yeah.
Well worth it. So we're trying to make contact with Nicholas Roach in Monaco. Could take a little while. We didn't have a camera on him during the event, but he's a pretty accommodating guy, and he's had a little bit more than most time to try and recover from that effort. It's our teammate Matteo Badalati, the Swiss rider, who's through and home, and he's finished his effort for the Israel Startup Nation squad. But look at the riders just in crocodile formation, winding their way up the hill. Going to take a while for the last of them to make it. Sepp Kuss, his second day of racing for Team Jumbo-Visma, is shortly to appear at the line, but he's got work to do to get there. Meanwhile, back the see if we can pick out some of the names. Dan Martin, I can tell you, is towards the back of affairs. I wonder if he had a little bit of a struggle with connections during the day. LAWSON, CRADDOCK, Patrick Conrad, they're riders who are a little bit further back than they would have liked. Adam Yates back in 36th place still. Something to find. Primož Roglic, I can tell you, running 26th within 800 meters of the finish line. Simon Yates here. Still has a way to go. Sepp Kuss just about has the job done. The 25-year-old American, stage winner in Vuelta a España in 2019. An emerging pro rider who's had a useful hit out in top 15 finishing position. For Nicholas Roach, he believes, Alex, that it's really important to show the jersey well and to actually, you know, take this seriously. This style of racing, he doesn't see it as being the same as heavy quotes real road racing, but it is still something that you must respect, and for him it's a competitive outing and important to show what you're made of.
Absolutely, and we saw from Nicholas when we saw an interview with him in the first stage, and he's clearly super motivated, and he took it easy in the test event and then really laid out a big performance in the first race. But you know, it's a tough time for cycling with the current climate and with the sponsorship model of cycling. The sponsors are not getting their normal return for what they put into the sport. So this platform that we're on here is, you know, you can see all the riders are in their team kit, both on the video feed and on the AR platform. So you know, the sponsors here are getting good exposure, and it's great to see, and it's good that, it's like I said before, it's good that we can still race.
Arms up from Nicholas Roach, and we're hoping we can pick up, well, that's man. Second across the line, Larry Warbass. Let's hear from him now. All smiles from the former national champion.
Your face, did you enjoy riding at home?
I mean, yeah, it was fun, but it was really hard. I'm dead now.
You don't really look dead, actually.
I'm good at talking when I'm on the limit.
We have your colleague Sevan Dillier here in the studio, and he was really suffering hard. How hard was it for you?
Oh yeah. Oh, that was one of the hardest hours of my life. So, I mean, it was okay until I hit the climb, and then I was just like, oh my God, hang on for dear life.
Do you think it's even harder than in real life?
It's different, you know. We train for 5-6 hour events, and this was only a little more than one. So we don't usually have that kind of effort, especially now that there aren't so many long TTs in the races. So yeah, it was brutal.
Thank you. Recover well and enjoy the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Brutal indeed, but effective stuff from the man who finished in third place on the day, Larry Warbass of HE Tour Le Mondial. Nothing you can do about the man who got the win, and you can disregard that graphic. I can tell you it was Nicholas Roach that got the win on the day. These some images from the first day of racing. It was Roach that got the win from Team Sunweb. Ilnur Zakarin in second, Larry Warbass in third, Hamilton, Whelan, Kwiatkowski, Pernsteiner and the rest. Tomorrow we've got the penultimate day of racing in the Digital Swiss 5. It's 36.8 kilometre thrash to Langnau. The fearsome Schallenberg Mountain is the first of two climbing tests. Second half of the race is downhill, so do expect a fast finish into Langnau tomorrow. We look forward to that. For now, we're going to take a rest. So too is Nicholas Roach. Congratulations to him, and I'd like to thank Alex Dowsett for his assistance during the day. My name is Declan Quigley. We'll be back tomorrow. Please do join us then. But for now, it's goodbye.